Have you ever heard the whispers about a place that doesn't exist on any map? In a quiet, little town in Oregon, locals talk about a library, but this isn't just any library. It's said that it only reveals itself to those who have lost something profound, something they can't quite put into words. One cold, rainy evening, a man named Theo was walking home. The air was heavy, mirroring the weight in his heart from his wife's funeral earlier that day. Lost in his grief, he took a wrong turn, finding himself on a street he'd never seen before. It was cobblestoned and dimly lit by old-fashioned gas lamps. At the very end of the street stood a small, unassuming building. There was no sign, no name, just a single wooden door, slightly ajar, beckoning him in from the rain. Hesitantly, he pushed the door open. The air inside was warm and smelled of old paper and something else, something like forgotten memories. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with countless books. But as he looked closer, he noticed something strange. None of the books had titles. No authors were listed on their spines. They were all completely blank. Behind a large wooden desk, a woman with kind eyes looked up as if she'd been expecting him. "You're here for her," she said, her voice soft but clear. Theo froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "What?" he managed to whisper. The woman didn't answer with words. Instead, she stood up, walked to a nearby shelf, and pulled out a single volume. She placed it in his hands. It was surprisingly warm to the touch and heavier than it looked. His hands trembled as he opened it. The pages weren't filled with text. They were filled with images, with moments. Memories he didn't remember living. He saw his wife, her face bright with a smile he hadn't seen in years, laughing in places they had never visited together. He heard conversations they'd never had, whispered promises under starry skies he didn't recognize. It was a life they never got to finish, a future that had been stolen from them. His voice shook as he looked up at the woman. "What is this?" "It's the life you were meant to have," she replied gently. Before the accident, Theo dropped the book, its pages fluttering as it hit the floor. "She died of cancer," he corrected her, his voice cracking. The woman simply shook her head. "Not in this timeline." He sank into a nearby chair, his mind reeling. He picked up the book and began to read. He read for hours, which blurred into days. He wasn't just reading. Living. He lived through every page, every shared laugh, every quiet moment, every dream they built together in that other life. The grief that had hollowed him out began to fill with a bittersweet warmth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman spoke again. "You can stay here," she said. "You can live in these for beautiful do everything else. Your life outside this library will fade away." Theo looked down at the book. He had reached the final page, and it was blank, waiting to be written. "What happens if I leave?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "You'll remember everything you've seen here," she said. "But you'll never be able to return." Theo looked at the blank page, at the unwritten future of a life he could have. He thought of the real world, the one filled with pain, but also with the real memories he'd made with his wife, however brief. "Etukadip stest grandest back to her." He turned and walked out the door, back into the rain, the moment it journeyed back. The cobblestone street was gone. The library had vanished as if it were never there. He was back on his familiar route home. Now, every night, Theo dreams of turning pages in a book with a blank spine. And every morning, he wakes up with a smile, his heart full of beautiful memories that never happened, but feel more real than anything else. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tailies from the corners of the world you've never seen. See you next time.